been actually thinking on how could I contribute to this topic that we have today. And then I've been thinking, okay, React, I'm not that technical. I have to admit that I can't really go into a topic that would be attracting the whole audience to kind of be amazed by something really technical. But because I came to React myself about a year ago, and I really was kind of struggling with kind of finding the confidence to apply for a position that was calling for React, because I have, Angular background in that sense. So this topic is going to be on how can you score a job or a project if you don't have React as a keyword on your CV. And I'll just walk through this topic from the hiring manager's point of view. I really want to keep this as a motivation speech to tell people that, hey, go for it. Even though you don't have certain skills that someone is asking for, it doesn't really kind of, it's not a reason for you to kind of, look elsewhere. And
right,
yeah.
Yes, please go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, sure. I don't really have a presentation for this. I want to keep this authentic, so I just have a little bit of notes here to keep on track. But it really has started to kind of turn out on the market that React is now the #1 option that projects are being started with, that companies are hiring for, and that creates, of course, some kind of imbalance on the market, that it's a huge demand for people who do have the React background, which causes them to kind of be in a dream position that they really can go to figure out what the company is that they want to join, what kind of project, and more specifically, they can ask for the salary that kind of they want to see on the paper. But on the other side, there is also other people who don't have React in their skill set yet. So does this situation, this polarization of React versus Angular, Vue.js, and so on, does this mean that people just have a kind of a poorer standing in this competition? Of course, eventually it comes back to people's interests. So if you are into something specific, then you can't forcefully go to React. But if you are interested in React, and this target is this topic is targeted at people who may have maybe joining this session or look at the kind of the recording later on, that who doesn't have kind of a React background is still kind of really kind of in demand on the market as well. It's not just that people like experienced React developers would have job openings. It's for people who do have a front-end background. Mm-hmm. So that being said, I myself, as I mentioned already earlier, I'm nowadays working as a team lead. So I do have I'm working with a team of about 10 developers with full stack. So we do have a React front end, and we have an Elixir backend. We have a database and APIs and so on. So in that sense, I also now have started to React myself, but having an Angular background, I really went through this challenge of looking at the job market and all these job ads just kind of pushing for React skills, React developers, and so on. I'm also an in-house guy, so I've always worked for product companies. I've never been in consulting, and so this perspective also comes from hiring people in-house. So if you are a consultant, or if you are in the consulting industry, it's really more about then this hard skill of React versus having maybe a different kind of a skill set to offer with all the soft skills as well. But then it's also, now I'm specifically talking about the job market and how to get a job, and not how to get started in that job. So I won't go into how to learn React to yourself, but rather on how to enter a project, or how to kind of reach out to a company that may be hiring. So the big question is, what if my CV lacks React? If I don't have this keyword, what's really happening then? I would say that you're not alone, because there is a lot of people who do have skills in a variety of JavaScript frameworks or libraries, and the competition has been so diverse in like a couple of years ago, but now it's just everything is asking for React. So there is a lot of people moving from Angular towards React. It's also about front-end development, so it's not about the actual library as such. So if you are into front-end development, if you have like a decent background in front-end development, it's not about the library. So you will be really getting up to pace quite quickly. And React is beautiful in that sense, at least based on my own experience as well, that it's quite a shallow learning curve, so that you can start contributing to a team, or you can provide value to a team quite quickly. So that's it. You are in the game. So don't kind of hold back if you want to kind of apply for a position that calls for React skills, but you don't have any yet. Maybe it's interesting to jump to the other side, so to the actual side that is behind the job ad. So there's also some insights that may be valuable to people to know that, again, also here, if a company or a hiring manager is putting a job ad live, React in this case then would be one of the keywords. It's about more than just one of these keywords that needs to be met by an applicant. It's about really a position that is not curved in stone. So if you read a job ad, you really have to take it with a pinch of salt, because the job ad may be outdated. It may have been copy pasted from somewhere. I'm not going to kind of talk on what really happens, but it's really that it's some kind of a frame. And there is really more to it. It's mainly about some gaps that have been addressed, that a company or a team needs to be filled. And besides these known gaps, there is a whole series of unknown gaps as well that maybe a hiring manager is not aware of or hasn't thought of yet. But if they receive a profile that is really kind of standing out, even though there is no React mentioned, they can still see that, hey, that profile is actually containing a lot of these gaps that person could be filling a lot of gaps we have, versus just someone that does have 5 years React experience and maybe nothing else. And of course, it's about the team. So if you do have an existing team and you're hiring for someone to be added to that team, it's a little bit like a house of cards in a good sense. So you get one more card that you have to place on top of that house. And it's really about completing a team and not putting the whole team at stake. And here again, if you have someone who is really excellent in React, like perfect, but if it's not the right personality for the team, then it's also kind of a drawback. So it's about more than just one keyword in the CV. Now, jumping back to the developer's point of view, or thinking of how do I step into React? How do I really get into a company, or how do I nail a position that is about developing React? Again, it's a keyword. So, well, of course, it's a really fascinating library if you go into the details, but it is a keyword, and it's something that if you don't have it yet, just convert it to some interest. Let the recipient know that you really want to kind of call it a want to have, like it's something that you want to learn. I think that's, if you're really highlighting and pushing for like something that you want to learn, it's always a really interesting read for someone to go through an application, for instance, or in a job interview, for instance. And then, of course, focus on what you already can offer. So this is in particular to fill these gaps that you you may have to fill for a company, but the company doesn't really know yet. I still want to emphasize that having any kind of experience with modern frameworks, with modern tools in general, of course, TypeScript, Angular, Vue, you name it. And of course, also functional programming, for instance, is going to be a huge benefit, of course, in this competition. And then it's about the soft skills, and then it's just the perspective. So it's about the diversity, and it's also something that Saku mentioned earlier in his presentation, that we really need to have like as many perspectives at companies and teams as possible. So the long story short, the market really is in desperate need to get React developers here in Finland. Of course, all kind of developers, but because this is about React, so it is in specific that there is a lot of companies hiring for React. So we do need a lot of people who are at least interested in learning React. And I would say it's about hiring for front end and training for React. So it's not that you really must have React experience. If you have a long or an interesting background, if you have less of background, but you have a lot of motivation, it's still that you are in the game. Again, just to have it mentioned, if you have experience from modern tools, it is going to help you out. So it's not just about React, it's about the way on how front end is being developed nowadays compared to 10 years back with just jQuery and so forth. And maybe it's even an advantage that you are new to React. You don't need to have all this experience. Maybe you have a fresh opinion, or maybe it's also more joyful actually on the market that you are not being torn apart when a lot of companies are going to really fight for your 5 years of React experience. I've recently seen when a former colleague of mine has entered the market, and it was almost bloody to see on how some companies were throwing offers at that person. It's kind of the situation that you don't want to end up in, because you still have to make a decision, and it's a high risk that under these turbulences you can't have a clear mind and you end up making a bad call, and later on, a couple months, you will be in the same situation back on the market. Yeah, that's about it. I probably didn't use 15 minutes, so
yeah, it's fine. I think maybe it's good to go back to some points and revisit them with Saku and others. I mean, one of the points is that, like, I don't know much about recruiting, but and I'm not really good at applying to positions. But I mean, so I guess you can answer this one. Like, are you always looking for perfect fit? Like, you want 100% fitting person, or you go 90% or 80% or 50%, or what's your limit when you sort of have a position to fill? And I guess you want to fill it quite soon. You don't want to wait 1 year or 6 months or 3 months. How much do you compromise, or how much are you willing to compromise to get the position filled in time, instead of waiting for potentially better person to show up?
I have to be honest that we have been really lucky this year, that we have been looking for new people to join the team, and we also found really great personalities and skills. So in that sense, it's really kind of, I'm a bit polarized to kind of only see now the positives here, but it's about a deadline, of course, also that you need to get someone to join the team and to kind of to provide more hands and a fresh mindset, but you can't really jeopardize too much. You can't go down too much. And I would say on the overall match, the personality must fit the team. It's still like if you have good chemistry in a team, and I would say that we really do have a great team at the moment. It's too much to lose to take risks and just go to hire the first person or the kind of too easily. But you also can't just go for, hey, that's like perfect React background. It's really more deep than that. And I know that this is my opinion. I mean, I have a slightly different maybe sent to this, and Saku knows me from we have been in our previous life also in contact already, and I've also been looking for some position that has a slightly different set of tasks maybe to offer. But I personally really like to look into people who do have their unique set of skills and a really kind of unique perspective to add to the team. So it's not about like 10 keywords that need to be met. I would say that it's certain keywords that like a certain percentage of keywords that may need to be met, but if it's a really interesting fit, and that fit may even come in a different way. So if I'm it's good to let the team know, or kind of just your network know, that if you're looking for someone, or that you may have an opening also, so that on the silent market, it's also a really great chance just to talk to someone and to kind of identify if someone has to offer something. So we also ended up, for instance, hiring someone for the backend at the same time as we were focusing on the front end, simply because some of our team members had a really good contact or did a really great job. And maybe that's also part of the kind of future of work, that the whole team starts acting as a kind of a part of recruitment. And it's not just that someone from recruitment at the company would be focusing on this task or position, because eventually the team knows what they are working on, what kind of person they would like to join, and maybe also what kind of gaps there are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Let me pull something from YouTube. So I think the single libraries frameworks are a bit overhyped due to sales working that way. We need developers who understand component-based UI development and have other skills around that. So what do you think of this?
Yeah, I would say that's really a lot in line with what I have been also trying to push for. It's not just about a keyword. It's really about having like the experience in kind of in this context, in the full kind of front end, for instance. It's really about knowing more behind that, and then the skills around that. For instance, if you have someone who is like a front end developer but also is into design, it's a huge asset. If you have someone who is into content design, for instance, to be a bit more specific, that person then has that viewpoint of thinking of, well, what if a massive amount of content comes to a view? Is it going to look ugly and that kind of stuff? So it's like knowing in advance what kind of risks are coming up and so on. So the single library point of view, of course, from a company's perspective, it's a benefit if you have multiple projects, everything is in the same library and so on. But on the long run, of course, it may be a little bit boring for the developers too, because people really like to try out new things as well. And right now, it just happens to be such a call for React. So we'll see how things turn out. It's at the moment. It didn't used to be this way, and what it looks like in a couple of years from now, we'll be seeing. So the most important thing is just to be able to adapt and learn kind of new skills.
Yeah. So is full stack still a thing? Are you hiring for full stack developers, or are you going for more specific ones again?
We do have front-end developers in our team. We do have back-end developers in our team, but we do also have full-stack developers. So, and it's a huge benefit because these people know when thinking of specs, for instance, they're able to look at something all the way through from the UI to the database and perhaps APIs and so on. If you have someone then who's really kind of only back-end, these are the experts on the backend domain, and the front end people then probably have more insights about kind of working with UX and UI and so on. So I would say it's the perfect mix to have like people who are specified or specific on a very kind of on one of the sides. But full stack, I would say full stack, at least when I started my career, it was the only thing, and it used to work really nice back then.
Yeah. So related to this, now, I mean, full stack is I see it's very valuable, but do you see that there is even more room for specialization, that you would get really, really strong at some small niche, and then like market yourself to companies in this, that you're like the top guru at this certain thing, that's really a small thing, but like a...
Yeah. I'm not a consultant, and I'm not in the kind of the consulting business. So I would say no. That's my point. But personally, I appreciate that it's not going too deep. But of course, if someone is really deep, like hyper focused on something, some niche, that may be of benefit in something. But then, of course, does a project or does a company need to think that that specific is another question. That is it kind of then already too deep insights that there are. Personally, I don't go that deep. So I've always been more of a generalist than a specialist. And in that context, I would also say that try to kind of get a wider perspective to be able to connect to others, and also to have like this understanding on what's happening on the other side of the fence as well.
Maybe it's a good time to pull Saku to discussion. So what do you think of this like hyper specialization, so that you will get really, really good at some certain topic, maybe you're like in the top 10 people of the entire world on something? How do you see that in terms of getting a job, or it's more a consulting thing, like that you become the king of the hill or queen of the hill?
I think the job market works both ways. I think there's definitely call for room for super specialists. I think I've gone through quite a few cases with, say, cloud architects or whatever, and who've been doing different architectural designs and etc. And the mindset of having then kind of like a vast experience on a vast number of applications to be set and created architecture around and etc. The salaries go in line, but there's always becoming that moment in time when that sort of super specialization becomes then anchored with the business logic. So it starts to be a case for consultancy work, which is then gradually being drawn away from the more technical work into yes, still understanding a lot of the technical details and etc., but at the same time, kind of like year on year becoming more and more of a well, not a PowerPoint consultant, but somewhere halfway towards that.
Yeah, that is sort of my personal experience. I mean, I focused a lot in certain technology, and then became really known around it, and then it's bringing work and money. So there's, I guess it depends. Like, what's your aim? Like, do you aim to get employed to work in a bigger company, or do you want to do something small for yourself? Or maybe it's sort of, maybe there are many ways to approach. One thing that came to mind is this topic of soft skills. So, I mean, it's very, you can say in a job advertisement that, yeah, I'm looking for someone that knows React and Redux and Webpack and ESLint and a lot of technical terms. About what do you think of like the value of soft skills in the people you interview for positions, or how do you value soft skills in applicants? Maybe Mika first.
Yeah, of course, there's a long range of soft skills, but in usually like thinking of the overall context of soft skills, I really I think it may be even more important than the hard skills, because if you are able to adapt and learn, for instance, sorry, you will also be able to use your soft skills then to kind of to really build something that is stronger, like all in all then. Yeah, it's of course it's just about finding the real balance. I would say that soft skills, it's maybe not personality and soft skills. It's probably it's a different thing, but eventually all these soft skills really make it also easier to kind of get along with people, or to have someone who comes to help you out if you have some question, some problem or something. And maybe this brings it back also to, well, a topic we'll be looking into shortly, in kind of the joy of, or the joyful future, but it's also about eventually, I mean, the time spent at work, you need to also be able to enjoy that, because eventually if you are at the startup, for instance, it's, to be true, honest, it's a small chance that it's going to really grow big. So you don't want to lose that time that you have spent like pushing for some success, but you also want to have some great memories. And I would say the soft skills here are really helping out also to like create a story that you have been working with really great people on a project, well, that turned to be outside a sunset technology, but you still have something to tell. And soft skills in this context versus if you would have been working with like the top-notch developers, maybe you wouldn't have that much to tell. Maybe you don't really have a story that you can kind of think of when you're having a cold beer in the front of your summer cottage on a summer night. But I would say soft skills are really the spices then, whereas the hard skills are the actual food that you're putting into your mouth.
Yeah, Elisa, maybe you want to continue on this one because it's sort of your specialty.
Yeah, I was just loving how this is feeding my confirmation bias so badly.
Sorry.
So of course I think they're highly valuable, but they're highly valuable precisely what Mika said. The thing is, like Saku said and like Mika said in the previous speeches, IT sector is more and more teamwork. It's like there are very few projects where you can truly work alone. And those teams are becoming diverse, they are becoming multinational, they are coming like truly global and hybrid. And all of those requires that we are better at being with different kinds of people who are not certainly like we are. And that requires our capability to know ourselves and to be okay with others. And we haven't really never ever been taught how to do that. So if you have those skills, if you're willing to learn those skills, if you're willing to be okay of not knowing those skills, that is so super valuable from the perspective of the hiring part, but also from the perspective of your own life.
Yeah. I think that's true. That I mean, the soft skills are something that you can apply in your own life a lot, like a lot more than direct skills. So it makes sense. Maybe Saku, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think if there's one thing in all the recruitments I like to sort of assess, it's kind of like, how reflective a person is. In a lot of the roles, there might not be a massive need for a very reflective personality, but as long as one is able to sort of reflect on one's own behavior or one's own behavior in relation to others, that's already sort of a sign that one's able to contribute to a team without a very sort of a perhaps volatile personality or very sort of a this is my way or the highway sort of personality, but rather think about how to go about it and understand other people's points of view. So I think if there's one sort of soft skill that I like to call the superpower, it's that reflection. It saves many headaches at the workplace.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I guess you get into these interesting situations when you have to recruit, because maybe you find somebody that's really, really good technically, but then maybe they're not so nice as a person. It's not somebody you want to work with. Then you might have somebody that's really nice to work with, but maybe their technical skills are not so good. So how do you choose between these two people? Like, do you take the really technically good person or the nice person? So what's your choice?
It's it really is all about the technical skill, if you have that sort of a comparison. However, I think oftentimes it's more about having a super skilled or a very skilled, and then kind of like then the positive personality and the sort of easy to go along with it and etc. Can really make a difference. But of course it all boils down to the question how badly tempered the person is.
Mm.
Yeah, if you're the best of what you do, you can be an asshole. But if you're not the best of what you do, then it helps if you're easygoing and nice to work with.
Mika, do you have anything to add, or what's your take?
Yeah, well, we see it's complicated. And if you have someone who really stands out, who is kind of difficult to work with, though, it's like a large tree just throwing a lot of shadow or shade on the others, so that other people may not be able to start flowering in that sense. So I guess it is that balance. So is it 70% hard skills, 30% soft skills? Is it 60, 40, 80, 20? It's you can't really say it that way. It really is kind of case by case, I would say. There is a lot of risks that both ways have. So if you have someone who is really easy to kind of work with, but who doesn't know about the technical domain, you can't really reach anything. And the other way around, if you have someone who's perfect in coding something but doesn't care about specs, it's also the same case, that you don't really end up having a working solution either.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, did you have something to add, Saku?
Yeah, just thinking about that, even if you were the best, but, if it's a question of, working in a consultancy role, be that, within, say, a corporation or as, at a consultant house, it's hard to get by, if one is not focused also on the people side. So it just makes sense.
Yeah, so speaking of teams, what do you think of this? Normally we think that development is lonely work, that you're sitting with your computer doing the specifications and writing the code and so. But then you have pair coding, you have mob programming, or that you will do programming in a different way, in a bigger group. So do you think that has some implications on hiring or working with people, or have you tried different ways of working in your companies or with people? What's your experience on this, that you will change the way you work to make people work better?
It's also a question that you mentioned pair coding or pair programming, for instance. It's also something that usually people say that, hey, would be a really nice to do thing. But the last time I've been in pair coding, that's quite a while back already. It's just it may be a little bit difficult to set that up, and it's quite challenging also that you really have to be kind of. It takes more than 100% to work with someone on the same lines of codes. It's really great experience though. I would say that it's important to have a decent process on how to kind of have the specs handed over to the developers, and then you have someone then maybe focusing on some part of what needs to be developed, and then the code review, for instance, is the discussion point then where people are walking through what has been implemented and what decisions have been made. And that's really kind of also the sparring side that you can have, like it's the developer socializing point, for instance. It's like over in kind of GitHub, GitLab, if you have a merge request, pull request, then it's really where you talk to people and where you can show your great ideas, your great sites, or where you can just also like act quite offensive. Or you can really also act very social, and you can it's a great way also for juniors, for instance, to learn a lot if you have the code review. So I'm not sure about the peer programming, for instance, but I would say that the code review, it's where you really connect the team.
Yeah. Anything to add, Elisa or Saku?
Yeah, it's pair programming or mole programming is just one aspect of it. But for example, retrospectives or sprint planning or dailies are just as well situations where it really shows whether you're able to be with people or not.
I look forward to more kind of like coach roles, whereby someone's perhaps doing half time coding and then half the time looking after, say, group or groups of more junior developers, and to be able to sort of nurture kind of like help newcomers into the field as well. And I think for the people who sort of feel that they like to have that people side to their work, I think those types of roles can be quite meaningful.
Yeah, well said, because that eventually also requires a lot of effort by the mentor or by kind of the senior who will take someone new on board. It's not that you can handle your daily work at the same time. You need to put enough bandwidth aside, and that's really nice that you have brought that up, because it takes time and it's valuable time invested.
And when done properly, kind of like that model can scale up as well a little bit. So raise it up at the workplace.
Yeah. I think it's related to what Saku mentioned in his presentation, that we have this discussion in Finland that there's a talent shortage or companies cannot find people, but maybe it's the other way around. Maybe we should have companies that are willing to train people. So if you change the system, maybe you start finding people easier. But that's sort of a question. I mean, how should companies go more into this direction of training? If you recognize on company side that I have trouble finding people, maybe I should change the way we work. How do you change the process of the company?
An example from it's a year and a half ago when I was still working at Elisa, and they were hiring summer trainees in January, and the aim was to get, I think it was 3 people kind of like into this particular unit, and they got really super good folks applying, and what they ended up deciding was they ended up hiring, was it 15, and with the idea that someone was thinking about, okay, I'll be guiding folks, say 15 to 20% of the time. They made it a half a times type of a position, and they were able to scale it up, and they knew that they're going to have investments to be made in the near future, and it just made sense to invest in the people and etc. And high majority stayed also after that sort of the initial period. So I'm just super excited to see more and more of these initiatives sort of popping up, but still I'm sort of missing this mindset that's actually sort of the very kind of like an essential way of all good sort of coding workplaces and companies.
Yeah, I think it makes sense that the companies have to change a little bit to adapt to the situation and the market. I think one of the aspects in the Finnish market, as far as I understand, is that it can be difficult to get a job unless you know Finnish. Do you see that it's going to change in the future, or what it actually looks like from your perspective? Do you agree with it, or do you think it's easy for someone from outside of Finland to get a job in Finland in software development?
Shall I go first?
Yeah, sure.
I think there's two questions in what you just mentioned. One of the questions is to land a role in Finland from abroad, and that entails a relocation process. And then, of course, it means what affects is, if you're within the EU, so it's all very simple to sort of just move over here and all the rest of it. If it's outside the EU and one doesn't have a visa to Finland, it will take a longer time to set all the paperwork up. But still, a lot of companies and more companies are doing that, and it just requires the mindset that the companies have the expertise of doing that, and they have the process of, okay, they know it's going to take about half a year, so they plan ahead and etc. And I think it's definitely a trend, and all the scale ups, especially startups who've landed a good lump of money to scale up business. They've just noticed that it's super difficult to recruit people from within the country, kind of like in bigger numbers, and relocations is then the way forward. And then about kind of like being already in the country, and then to land a role in Finland as a developer without, say, Finnish skills. I think it varies according to the geographical location, and a little bit according to the industry as well. And so, if we're looking at software consultancies, the consultancies that serve, say, the public sector require Finnish mostly. The consultancies that then work more with the private sector companies and multinationals and whatnot, they're definitely more open to using only English and etc. So it varies a little bit. I can carry on after others have commented, unless you say that's enough.
Yeah, maybe we can do a round. So Elisa and Mika, if you have anything to add, and maybe Saku can go further after that.
I just only comment that I have is that I'm seeing the need to be able to speak English well. So I think it also works the other way around. I can't really comment on how much the Finnish will affect the job market, but if you're a Finn-speaking developer who doesn't have a good English-speaking skills, then that's another thing. So you really should pick that up, because more and more jobs will require also that. So working both solely on Finnish or solely on English might not be the ideal way to work, or the ideal way to go forward.
I don't even remember a position I would have been working at that would have been in Finnish, to be honest. So I've been lucky enough to have this international setup at startups or whatever companies I've been working with. And I would say that today the language is no barrier, as long as you speak and you're able to communicate fluently in English, then you have what it takes. And looking at an application, I don't think that Finnish being mentioned would have any large kind of difference. Of course, depending if you have user interfaces that are aimed at certain languages, of course, I would say it is a benefit if someone speaks German, someone speaks French, and you do have like certain markets that you're targeting, that you also have maybe that mindset to think of some culture changes in the behavior then also. But this is not about the language. This is about someone knowing about the local culture then. Well, that's a different topic then again. But right now, we're just kind of having some changes in our team. Right now, we only have Finnish-speaking members, but any of the written messages still is in English. We're going to have someone new joining soon to our team that will then kind of force back to using English. But because we are using English anyhow, so it doesn't really make a difference.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. So you have to sort of prepare your organization to accept English-speaking people if you want to recruit in English. Because I guess in the worst case, your source code will be in Finnish. I mean, it has happened in the past that people go and write their source in Finnish, but I think most developers in Finland, they still write in English when they write code. Maybe Saku, you can continue. You have something in mind.
Yeah, two comments. further. There's one is kind of like all the companies that welcome coders in using English. Then my question to those companies is okay, what type of language ceiling do they have in place? So, if you're as a developer welcome to join in with English, how about then, becoming a developer manager, for example, or such like? And it tends to be that you find a sort of Finnish language ceiling in place if one is interested in something like that. And I think the companies that hire sort of then, developer manager might be in English, but there's beyond that, it might be a lot more trickier to proceed, and that's something to bear in mind, kind of like realistically. And another one is then considering moving to Finland, not making a massive advertisement here, only pointing out the kind of like critical elements, but really, if one and when one is able to land a role in Finland quite easily in the field of tech, if the spouse, for example, coming with a family, if the spouse is from another field, it's a great idea to have a look what's the opportunities to land a relevant role here in Finland, because not all the fields are like tech. So that's something to bear in mind.
Yeah, in some ways we're very, very fortunate because we work international most of the time, and